So this piece of equipment right here is the focus of pretty much the entire poster, even though the objective of the poster was to convince young musicians to start learning Cubase. But this kind of goes hand in hand with Cubase anyway, sort of an external piece of equipment that can be used to plug in all the instruments there into the different line 1, line 2, line 3, yada yada. And there's I'm gonna pretty much ignore all this stuff here because it takes away from the features that you'd use in Cubase, even though this piece of equipment works pretty much directly with Cubase. The graphics that I'm going to have are going to point more towards using Cubase on the computer rather than doing it externally. So to tie in the musicians with the mixer, I'm going to have to go back to the sketchbook and bring on some more layouts. What I have here is these would be the vector illustrations of the different musicians that I have. I already pretty much made vector illustrations out of all of them, so I just kind of drew them kind of sketchy in the book here, just so I know that this is supposed to be a guitar player. There's the vocalist and the drummer and the bass player. And there's the Yamaha mixer. I just drew it half-assed. But what I had to do was somehow separate them all and have like one line, which would be like the patch cord that would go into each different line in the mixer. And so graphically I was able to demonstrate how the musicians can use this external Yamaha mixer, and then eventually somehow figure out a way that I can make that go into graphic representations of Cubase, so it would show them how all the equipment works. So I got a few more things here. Here's the bass player, and I was going to also demonstrate how they can use different equipment, or maybe like a bass amp or an effects processor, and that would go from the musician to the equipment. There's the patch cord going into line 1 of the mixer. So there's different ways to graphically explain all of these things. I was able to figure out another layout which would make a little bit more sense. Same thing, just better graphics. I thought maybe I could zoom in on the fretboard of Styles' guitar, but I kind of like to have them all full, like full images, like something like that. There's the equipment again. It goes directly down into line 2 or whatever. And then I came up with another design layout that would show the different musicians, and then one of these boxes up here would be the line out from the mixer into the software itself, into Cubase, and this would be like the recorded audio event. It's like sort of like a WAV file, several of those, and you'll see different examples of that later on. And then I'd have a little bit more text here in this page layout. I would have information about stuff, maybe some screenshots of the program. And then down here I would have a bit more information. I got an image of the actual box, the package of the Cubase box. There's the Yamaha logo just drawn real quick, and some of the other things too. So the way you'd read it is this would be the first thing you'd see, and you may see the musicians too, and then follow the lines, and then you go through some more text, more information, the last bit of info, logos, and that would be the end of the whole project. But this information is really quite complicated info, so I'd have to talk about how multi-tracking works, how you'd have to learn to use different things like compression, automation, and some of the... It's a huge 200-page manual just to read how to use Cubase, so that's something I'm going to have to work on. It's not just as simple as playing the music, plugging it in, and magically you get an album, but still more stuff to work on anyway. As far as the vector illustrations are going, I've been able to get quite a bit more detail into the rendering of the material here. I'll see if I can zoom in a bit. Instead of just using trapping or like a shape and filling in the shape with color, which kind of leaves you with a pretty substantial reduction in the clarity and the detail that you'd find going from a photo to basic simple shapes. You can see how these shapes here are the actual colors that were in the photo, but they're really choppy and really big clunky shapes which don't really render skin tones very well. So one of the solutions would be to go into Photoshop and smooth those out, but then it's not a vector illustration anymore. But if I can, it might be a little bit dark, but what I have up here is I was able to use lines just to get the rendering of the hair a little bit more realistic. And the same lines, I was able to do that here with this shirt too, to sort of get a little bit better texture, or to render the wrinkles in the shirt a little bit better. It looks a little bit better. This is zoomed way in too, so it's going to look better at smaller anyway. Down there you can see how it gets a little bit darker close to the end here, so the lighter objects come out more and the darker objects go back a little bit better, and there's some shading there where his forearm there is in front, so that part there is darker, so that turned out a little bit better. Still got to work on this microphone pole a little bit more. And there's some more texture here with the microphone, and that part right there, that should be a little bit darker and look a little more. So that's one guy. So what I was trying to do originally was figure out how I could take a guitar player like this guy, plug him into Cubase, and have it all make sense of what the poster was about. So to solve that problem, I had him playing the guitar as he normally would. He's plugged into the Yamaha mixer, but in order to bring out some of the features that Cubase has, is I have these different pieces of equipment in the background which are actual screenshots of some of the different utilities that you can use. Like this one here is for reverb and things like that. And all of these different buttons here, you can turn these knobs in Cubase and get it and edit the sound. And another one that we have here is this is an actual VST instrument, or like a digital preamp that can actually change the sound of the guitar. Like you'd have your volume and your gain and your presence and treble and bass and things like that. You can turn those knobs and it'll change the sound of your guitar. So graphically, what that would mean, that Style here is playing the guitar as he normally would, and he can actually be plugged into all these different instruments and pieces of equipment in Cubase. So that's why I have that as the background, and that's why he's having a good time playing the guitar there. And the reason why I had to have him as a vector illustration, not just straight out of a picture, was because it would be a little bit too difficult to actually cut him out in Photoshop and just slap that picture on there. I thought that's a little bit, I don't know. Also, if the image gets too large, then it starts to get a little bit distorted. So if he's a vector illustration, it's just a nice media that I like to use, but also there will be no distortion if I enlarge him up to be the size of a building or whatever. It's going to look the same one size as it would any other size. And it just works pretty well. It's a nice style. It kind of reminds me of that Grand Theft Auto sort of a style of art. And another thing that I really like about using vector illustration is you can get gradients of color going from red to a very light pink, and that is a nice way to render the reflective surface on the guitar, as you can see there. And you can change that and manipulate it however you want. I did that also with his arm there a little bit too, so you can get light to dark really nice. I have to smooth out those parts right there. That's a little bit more difficult to do, but it's turning out pretty well.